Hi, babes. Welcome back to the show. Hey, I met our guest today at a women's empowerment dinner here in Atlanta. She was actually in town from up north,
Virginia. Mhm.
Virginia. Yes, I was like Maryland, Virginia. And we just connected. We sat at the same table and wound up. I spoke to the girl that was across from me for a little while, connected with her, and then our guest today and I sat next to each other, and gosh, we talked for I feel like 2 hours or longer, and it was just so I don't know. It felt like the both of us felt like we had known each other for much longer than just that night, and we just connected. So I was like, oh my gosh! And now I've obviously been following her journey on social media, and I love so much of what she is about. As you guys know, obviously, I've been on a dating and relationship show or love and relationship show. I talk about relationships. I have I have ran like a mini self love course and relationship course, and I think that there's a lot of alignment in what she teaches, and definitely, obviously, to a deeper level, as this is her full time occupation as well. And we're going to understand how she became what I'm about to introduce you as. So, Becky Aste, she is a trauma informed somatic marriage coach. Lots of words right there. And every single one of them is important. So, trauma informed, which I have a story on that. Somatic, I have a personal story on that as well. Marriage, not so much. But a coach, I do know that because I've been one for the last 12 years of my life. But anyways, Becky, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show. And I really am so grateful that we've connected.
Thank you for having me. I was so excited to continue the conversation. I feel like it got cut short. My husband walked in and was like, "Time to go home." I'm like, "No, I feel like we were just getting started."
I
So
know.
I couldn't wait for this.
I know. I was like, maybe we should go back and slumber party with them. Keep this going. So no, I'm so excited. But yeah, it's so what I was just saying about like just the trauma informed and somatic. I was introduced to somatic. One of my first coaches, she after we went through probably our first 5 months of working together, she regrouped with me about 6 months later and was like, hey, I'm going through this whole breath work certification course and to become breathwork certified. And she had already talked to me a little bit about somatics because I believe when we were working together, she was being introduced to different modalities. Um, but anyway, so she became breathwork certified. I was one of her just beta testers kind of thing. And wow, that breathwork, it was like triactive breath, and oh my God, it's the most uncomfortable thing, but life-changing modality. And it was so powerful. She still obviously does it to this day. It was just a few years ago that she got certified, but she has since became certified in like neurolinguistic programming, EFT, um, time techniques. She's a trauma-informed coach herself. Like there's just so many different avenues of somatics, I guess, and just the subconscious reprogramming and body work. And she started her own like university to not university, but you know how we coaches call it universities, online programs, online certification programs. And I actually went through it about a year and a half ago. And granted, I wish that I had utilized those skills and exercised and practiced those techniques. I mean, I still have access to them. I have a whole book, a whole program on them and everything. But one of my favorites was outside of breath work was emotional freedom techniques and tapping. Because I think I understood it more and like how it was working, or my perspective of how it worked for me. Anyway, so I'll probably start integrating a little bit of that just out there. But yeah, and then like the trauma informed, just being trauma informed. When I first started working with that coach, it was right after we were filming Love is Blind. And she made a comment about something. She was like, the producers, they asked you guys a lot of questions that if you were vulnerable enough to answer truthfully, it may have dug up a lot of trauma. And I was like, yeah, well, I was one of those who just responded very honestly, raw, truthfully, transparent. And I was like, yeah, I said, and I'm a hot mess right now. And she's like, yeah, because they didn't they're not therapists, they're producers. And she's like, and they didn't facilitate that. She's like, that's like a beautiful thing about being like a trauma informed coach, is because you know how to not only dive into past wounds, but you know how to hold space and facilitate so that it doesn't like open the wound and the person is left to be like, well, what do I do with this now?
Yeah.
So I'm very much aware of how that is. And I just think like I highly commend you for getting certified and being that, because it's very
Yeah.
needed.
I mean, that's what intrigued me so much to ask so many questions that night, because I know like so much of what you went through was rehashing, and then gosh, it's broadcasted, and I don't know how much you rewatched it, but even if you avoid rewatching it, people are talking about it. So it's interesting because yeah, with trauma, it can do exactly that. Our body keeps the score of all the trauma that we've survived, and we have to be delicate and titrate when we revisit it, or else we can re-traumatize ourselves. And I think it's a myth too. I think it's a myth that people think they need to go backwards in order to move forward. Like, I have to dig up all of these old cans of worms in order to heal forward. And it's not always necessary. You
Mhm.
can start with just what's present, what's real right here, what's going on in the body, and, create a roadmap for where you want to be.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I didn't imagine there was like trauma informed therapists on set for you.
Yeah.
So that's why I was so curious.
No, there were not. There may be now, maybe because, obviously every season I feel like they make a stink about the mental health aspect of everything. But not make a stink, but we bring awareness to it. And
Mhm.
definitely for season one, that was not available for us. So
Right.
yeah. So, but I'm just, I'm grateful that there are, people like yourself, helping others in this world and just to facilitate all of that, regardless of what's going on. And obviously you handle more and you focus more on marriages. So tell us more about you and like your story and how you became this trauma informed somatic marriage coach.
Yeah, well, I didn't get here because we had a shiny, squeaky, clean marriage. You know some of the details, but we got married really young. I was 21, Sebastian was 23, so we were babies. I was fresh out of college. And I mean, you don't know yourself at that time. And even if you do, you change so much, right? By the time you hit your 30s. So we found ourselves 10 years into marriage, and we were separated. We were talking about divorce. We had two kids at that time. And what had happened from like falling in love to that place of total disconnection, broken vows, broken trust, there's betrayal, just a lot of toxicity, honestly. I can now see where it started. The seed was pretty early. And what I called it at the time, this dynamic, was chase and run. Kelly Chase.
Yeah.
So chase and run, where I felt like I was chasing and he was running. And when we were good, we were good. But when we weren't, or there's, a trigger, that was kind of the cycle we got into. And when I got deeper into self-development, I picked up new language, learned about attachment styles, and was like, oh, I'm anxious attached. And he's more the avoidant type. And keep going on, learn more. I learned, oh, codependency. I resonate with all of that. And addiction. Yep, that's pretty much him. So I learned so much. I did so much therapy over those 10 years. We did couples counseling. I listened to podcasts every like waking minute. I'd be in the car, just going to the store and be like, I have 5 minutes. Let me hurry up and pick a podcast on marriage so I can like fix this because it's crumbling, I got to figure this out. Very much this energy of like, I want to do everything I can. So I was very frustrated to find us in that place after a decade of effort. And I was like, we're worse off than when we started all of this healing. Am I just really bad at healing? What's going on? And so it was when we were separated, my nervous system was breaking down. I have like a journal. I was praying in my journal, dear God, my nervous system's on fire. I didn't even know what that meant when I was saying it at the time. I just felt like I couldn't sleep. I was having eczema breakouts. I called my best friend Courtney, the one that you met that night, the blonde. And I was like, Courtney, I think this is where people are before they have a nervous breakdown and are admitted for psychiatric help. Like, I just feel so unstable. My world's flipped
Oh,
upside down. So that's when I stumbled upon my first online coach, and she was a somatic coach. It was my first introduction to somatic work. Somatic just means pertaining to the body in contrast to the mind. So, spoiler alert, that ended up being the buzzer beater Hail Mary game changer that took us from dying to just surviving at first and then moving on to healing. And now I can say we're thriving. And
Mm,
I feel like I'm on my second marriage. It happens to be the same person, but we've completely destroyed, thrown out like the old blueprint. We've completely redesigned, marriage 2.0, what we're living right now, because that was not working for either of us. So now, yeah, it's my mission, purpose, like honor to get this out to other women and hopefully save them or decades of suffering that could have been avoided for me. But
absolutely.
okay, turned into my story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know it's interesting because, you know, granted, I haven't shared all of my story, but I say the same thing. It's like I wish that I had known, there's so much that I wish like school taught us, about actual life instead of the things that we are made to learn, that we have to learn in school. And it's like, wow, they could have saved me so much time had I just learned this information or these techniques or these tools when I was 19 years old. And I mean, I feel like someone said it one time, like it's a mentor of mine, but she was like, it's like we're teenagers and then all of a sudden have to become women and we have to know everything and we have to like just be in the world and what just happened kind of thing. And I was like,
Ah,
it's so true. Like no one teaches you how to become this like next level of you being just thrown to the wolves. And I felt like that's kind of how college was for me. It was definitely me being thrown to the wolves. And although, yes, I was only like 45 minutes from my parents' house, I could easily have gone home. But of course, you're like, this is different. This is exciting. It feels rebellious because after so many, like, not that my parents were super strict, but they were definitely more strict than other parents were. So I like staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I had like an 11 o'clock curfew. Like, this feels great, But it's just so interesting, like how we really there's such a shift, I think, and maybe
mhm.
that's not with everybody, but I think for a lot of us, and we don't know how to deal with things. We aren't giving these, oh well, if this happens, this is what you should do, where someone made a post the other day and on like fire, like if you catch on fire at school, like you stop, drop, and roll. She's like, I've never had to practice stop, drop, and roll, but
Ever.
ever. She's like, besides being in school, she's like, however, I do have to worry about, and then it was like a list long of things, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, they don't teach us these other things that are actually more normal that shouldn't be, we hate that they're normal and we hate that these things happen to us, but it's like, oh my God, it's crazy.
It's so true. And it can be overwhelming to think about because it really is a systemic thing, And when I think about just our world and like on a global level, I see just humanity in general, like spiraling in shame and like breathing in shame. And it seems like this invisible toxic fumes that we're all inhaling. There's just so much from being young, even what you're talking about, like we're not taught emotional regulation or how to like process triggers and stuff like that. At least us from, our parents' generation, we were taught to stuff it or, pull yourself up by
Right.
your bootstraps or big girls don't cry, all of those things that were shamed for us just being human and, wanting to express. And I know before we were recording, we were talking about our throat chakras and just
Mhm.
feeling like our voices were stifled and we didn't know how to express our authenticity, our authentic truth in a way that felt safe. And so it really can feel overwhelming when I think about it on like, okay, it is like a global problem that this is not the stuff we're taught, from youth, but I also am really excited because I see such a shift in consciousness rising and, women like you, women like that we know being able to use their platform to speak about this kind of stuff and raise awareness and reverse generational trauma and
Yeah,
do our part just with what we can control by changing ourselves. And it really does send out a ripple effect.
it does. It absolutely does. I love that expression, ripple effect. That's my coach. That's her institute. It's quantum ripple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Quantum Ripple Institute, I think, or Quantum Ripple Effect. Yeah, Quantum Ripple
That's
Effect
awesome.
Institute.
I love it.
So cool. Okay, so as far as explain a little bit more about, as you mentioned, like somatic, it just means body. So what does that mean though? For
Mhm.
those who aren't familiar with somatic work.
Yeah. So our body, and this is a popular book that's, gaining in popularity right now, but it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And even if you don't read the book, it's very heady. You can get the point from the title
Right,
alone.
right.
Our body really does remember what we've been through. That's why, for example, I don't know if you've ever been in a car crash, Kelly, but my car was totaled in college. Somebody T-boned me from the right side. And so anytime when I was driving from that point on for years, if I saw something kind of coming from the right side, I'd flinch. It was before I could even think about it or process it, my body remembered and would just flinch because it had been through a trauma like that.
Right.
So all of us, in my opinion, have been through at least some form of trauma. Some of it isn't as overt and big and like a car crash or losing somebody that is close to us or divorce or whatever it is, but we also experience little t traumas, which are just more, I call death by a thousand paper cuts, or
Mm,
more of a threat to our love and belonging and ego, more so than our, life or safety. But those just as much are they're left imprints on us, on our body. And so it can show up in symptoms that we in Western culture can normalize so much, like headaches, muscle tension, autoimmune, different aches and pains. We think, that's weird. Let me just take an aspirin and make that go away. Or let me
mm,
just take some Pepto-Bismol, my stomach's bloating. And whereas somatic work teaches you that none of that's bad, go for it if you want to take an Advil, right?
right.
But pausing first and asking our body, what could you potentially be trying to communicate to me about a deeper emotional need or maybe a trauma that is still there that needs to be healed? It's cool. Our body has a lot of wisdom, and there's different emotional centers depending on like where in our body we're feeling things. And so when I started learning about somatic work, I started learning about things like, yeah, this area, the throat, has a lot to do with communication and truth. And so now, anytime like my throat's acting up, that's the first question that I go to. Is there anything that I'm feeling afraid or unwilling to communicate? Even last week, I went out to lunch with Sebastian, and he was like, I couldn't sleep last night. My throat was bothering me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, do you have something you need to get out? And he was like, actually, yeah, I was afraid to tell you. And he shared something that he was afraid to tell me. I'm like, every freaking time. I used to think this stuff was so out there and woo, but I've seen too much and experienced too much now to be like, no, there really is a mind body energy connection.
Mm,
And so somatic therapy or somatic healing gets into the body to move trauma out, to clear out blocked, stuck energy, and basically rewrite cells' memories on a subconscious level so that we can, drive down the road again and not flinch every time we see something out of the corner of our eye, or if we've been through something, as devastating as abandonment or betrayal or whatever it is, we can learn to reclaim our security again, reclaim our presence again, not constantly living in this place of waiting for the next shoe to drop.
mm. And what does that look like? Like,
Mhm.
what does that look like for, like I said, like breath work was a modality of a somatic, like body work, but obviously there are other
Yeah.
techniques.
Yeah, there's so much. So somatic is just the umbrella term. Breath work definitely is a part of that. Breath work is a huge modality, especially the kind you were talking about. It's a way to move out blocked energy. There's also grounding techniques, which you can just Google. And it's almost so simple, it's annoying. Honestly, when I started this work, I was like, I've done intensives. I've learned so much about, all of this stuff when it comes to trauma and healing and blah, blah, blah. And you're telling me to do the five senses, which is that grounding tool, which is if you're
Mm,
triggered, you just name five things you see, four things you can hear, three things you can touch, two things you can taste, one thing you can smell.
I love
And
that.
that simple grounding tool was mine on repeat when I was just beginning this work and I was in a constant state of trigger and just needed to get out of my head and the rumination and the intrusive thoughts and come back into safety in my body. It would take me back into, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm here.
Mm.
Uh, some early grounding tools that I called on and that my clients love too is simple hand over heart, like actually touching your physical body. It does something neurologically when you add, your actual hand to your chest and say something comforting that you need to hear in that moment. My go-to was "It's okay, pumpkin," because that's what my dad used to say to me before
Mm.
he passed away. So it could just be something as simple as "I am safe" or "You're loved, you're okay, you're gonna get through this." A lot of my clients like self-hugs.
Mm.
There's different holds, containment holds that you can do in a moment of trigger or recalling something traumatic from the past. One, I don't know how many people can see this. I think you put this on YouTube, but one
Yeah.
is one hand under your, armpit, kind of touching your rib cage, and the other on your, bicep, upper arm. And this is just teaching your body, helping it remember that you are your own boundaried person. So much we can get kind of enmeshed with a situation or a person around us, and we forget that we are our own being. This is just a way to bring us back to the body, that we're
Mm.
separate from whatever situation is triggering us or person is triggering us. Another containment hold is one hand on your forehead and the other on the back of your head. And this is my go-to for those ruminating intrusive thoughts. It really is just like giving it a container and like touch,
Mm.
like I see you, it's okay. And these are all tools that you can try on and throw out what doesn't work for you, keep what does. But every time I do something like that, it's like an immediate slowing down of the speeding thoughts. You mentioned EFT tapping, that falls under somatic work. That's tapping on the different meridian points in your body, which are just the energetic centers that if you go to like an acupuncturist, that's where they're going to stick the needles on those
Right.
meridian points. So tapping on your actual body is a way to calm your nervous system. And I do it with my kids when my kids are
That's
having a
awesome.
tantrum. Like I'll start tapping on their head and they'll like immediately calm down and be like, "What are you doing, mom?" So, gosh, I could go on forever, but you can just Google, somatic grounding techniques.
Hmm.
And it's a way to, you think like of a hot air balloon, like, going off, 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 and you want to bring it back down to earth and center it. Those are grounding techniques. The other kinds of somatic techniques are more release. If you're thinking like pressure cooker or like, oh my God, I'm so angry or I'm so terrified. And it's like all this kind of buzzing energy that we just need to get out. A
Mm.
lot of times in society, like we're conditioned to sit proper and hold it in and, don't express that stuff. So much of that gets freaking trapped in our bodies. And one thing you can do if it is anger, is releasing that in a way that's not harmful to you or others. A lot of my clients, myself too, will scream into pillows or like let it out onto a mattress. This past weekend, we went to Julie's house, who you met, and we threw
Yeah.
glasses and bowls and all of the stuff against the trees in her woods. And we just had this little like sacred rage session. We all wore black because we're
That's
all going through
awesome.
different stuff right now. So, yeah, there's a lot you can do. It's really just following the cues of the body, what the body needs.
That's awesome. I love that. I like the rage thing. I need that. I
So
got some
fun.
pent up frustration happening.
So
Yes,
fun.
that's awesome. I love that y'all did that. Okay, so a little bit deeper on that. I mean, to me, I understand that those techniques are presencing the emotions. Like I'm feeling frustrated. Like even like with EFT, right? You're like, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I don't feel great, whatever. But do you know what is actually happening like scientifically? Like what about me saying I'm angry, and just presencing, what is that doing to like is it like the neurons? Like what is happening in the body for it to rewire the cells? And so that over time of that continuous practice in a familiar or similar situation, it won't be as traumatic feeling anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of us have one of five responses anytime there is a trigger. When there's a trigger, we notice we either go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flop mode. And most people know the fight, flight, freeze, but the fawn is like people pleasing. It's a way of placating. And yeah, me too, feeling unsafe. So it's like, I need to do whatever I can to make sure this person is okay with me, or else I'm going to die, is how it feels. The flop is just the depression, the like, oh my gosh, we're completely shut off, kind of numb, no desire, will to do anything productive. So when we're triggered, the hard thing is determining in that moment, is this like reality that there is actual a danger present, there's like a bear in the room, or is this just a replay of something that's happened in the past and I'm actually safe right now? Our nervous system doesn't really know the difference. So it takes a lot of training and coming back to a state of safety in those moments to be able to tell the difference if this is replay or reality. So, what's happening inside in any one of those 5 responses is our nervous system goes into what's called a sympathetic nervous system. That is our survival response. That is like, there's a bear in front of me, there is danger, I need to fight for my life or freeze or whatever. It's interesting because you see all of this in the wild too. Animals do this. Animals will either fight each other, they'll freeze completely. Some play dead if they're in the face of a predator. That's like the flop mode. Or right, if we were to come across a bear in the woods, we might be like, here, take a fish, anything, like to
Right.
save my life. That's kind of a fawn response. So, what we're doing when we're using any of those grounding tools or even acknowledging what's going on in the moment, it's taking us from that sympathetic, activated survival nervous system and bringing us into what's called the parasympathetic. That's where we can rest, we can digest, we can breathe deeper. We're able to get breaths down to our belly. Digestion actually speeds up and works better. And so it's creating new connections. If you look at the like actual nervous system, you can see nervous systems in museums. It's pretty cool. It's just like a whole body of like different wires and roadways. And there's all these chemical messages being sent all the time through our body's nervous system, from our brain to our body, body to our brain. And so when we're using any of these tools and rewriting, it's creating new pathways and new connections so that over time with repetition, just like with anything and with practice, now we see that car coming out the right side and I no longer flinch, right? It's just like, oh, okay, there's no danger there. I am safe right now. And you're able to change it over time. One last thing to like nerd out about the
I love
science of it is we all have this vagus nerve. So it runs from the base of our skull to the bottom of our spine, and it's like the superhighway of information. So chemical messages constantly being sent from our brain to our body, body to our brain, up and down that vagus nerve. So what's interesting is only 20% of the messages go from our brain to our body, but 80% go from our body to our brain. Meaning, like my story, for example, I did all the things from the neck up. I did the talk therapy, I did the couples counseling, I read the books, the podcast, the meditation, the affirmations, da 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 da. And I was wondering why I was still like stuck and spinning my wheels. And it wasn't until I went into the body and learned to work with the body, leverage the 80%, focus first on bringing my nervous system in those moments to a place of regulation, that things started to really shift in my actual life. I went from just like knowing a lot about healing and knowing the right things to say to actually feeling different and feeling a different energy, especially in relationship.
Yeah, I love that. I know that I have vasovagal syncope or whatever it's called. So a compromised vagus nerve,
Oh,
basically.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
How'd you find that out?
My well, so 2014, 2013 to 14, I lost like 10 pounds. And for someone who's 108 pounds to be 100 and or for someone who's like 108, 109 to be less than 100 pounds
Yeah.
was not very great.
Right.
So yeah, I was very gaunt looking. Like you could see, like I was getting like skeletal looking in my
Mhm.
face. I did not have an eating disorder in the sense of like bulimia or anorexia. I had disordered eating, which I think are two different things, but all together in the same eating disorder umbrella. I had gotten out of a relationship and got it fixated in my head that I wanted to like, I don't know, I was like, maybe if I like, we had talked about me doing like bikini competitions. And for whatever reason, my brain went into like, well, maybe if I just get like really like fit and just
Yeah.
snatch looking, like, although I was very fit at the time, like totally fit, didn't have a problem with my, I've never had a body image issue. Like, not really, anyways. Maybe my thighs, like, I always thought that I had quote unquote thunder thighs only because my mom was told as she was growing up that she had thunder thighs. And my mom is we have the very similar body type. So, although she didn't necessarily believe that, it was a story that she repeated, just telling whatever. And so I think because I just like replicated it because I was like, oh, well, everyone says I look like my mom and we have very similar body types and all that. So I'm like, I must have thunder thighs too, right?
Yeah.
That was really the only thing but I was never like Googling like thigh reducing exercises. Like I was just working out. Anyways, I was fit. I lost weight because I was Googling like bikini competitor diets, bikini competitor workouts. And thus those people have coaches, like when they do these competitions. This is why, because it really messes with you. Like psychologically, emotionally, nutritionally, physically, all the things, hormonally, it messes with you. I screwed up a lot of stuff when I did that.
Mm.
I started like I was cutting food. I probably, was doing maybe like 2 hours in the gym. Um, and I think I was teaching spin I was teaching spin at the time, not every day, obviously like 2 or 3 times a week, teaching spin. So that was like high intensity, aggressive workouts. And then I would like go and like try and like superset heavy weights because Google said if you lift heavier, you'll like tone up faster. And I was like, sure. Or I'd start sprinting on treadmills. I yeah, training like started doing sprints and things because the faster you run, like you'll shred up too. All these things. And I was like, this is a nightmare. And I would get anyways, that was a nightmare. I started losing weight because I was probably only eating like 800 calories a day. Like I would take like I was eating like chicken breast, sweet potato, broccoli, asparagus, some green vegetable. Sounds super healthy. But when you only eat 4 asparagus spears, a quarter of a sweet potato, and maybe half of a chicken breast for each meal, and you only eat 3 or 4 times a day, that's only like 600 to 800 calories of food.
Yeah.
Maybe, if that, right? And I was eating berries, like very low glycemic, low sugar fruit. Um, and then I gained 30 something pounds. I went from 98, 99 to, I guess, almost 40 to 138, 139 pounds, which that is a normal weight for everybody, right? It's so normal. But for someone who is 5'2" and has been around 110 pounds for 15 years, that was a lot for me.
Yeah.
And even 5 pounds when I'm as petite as I am, like you can see it. And it was very difficult. I was still eating about the same amount of food, but then I was like going even heavier in the gym. I hired a personal trainer. I did all these things. And the personal trainer, like nobody ever asked me how much I'm eating. They just asked, what are you eating?
Mm-hmm.
And I kept telling them chicken, asparagus, sweet potato. And they're like, I don't know why you're not losing this weight, And then anyways, fast forward like a year or so later, and I was introduced to like an online nutrition workout stuff, Beachbody, and started following the programs, eating and honestly, the like cut calorie bracket was, if I needed to lose weight, that would have been it. But it had me eating more food than I was already eating. And so I started actually losing weight in that regard, because I was eating more. I was actually fueling my body and everything. But anyways, all of that said, I jacked up my hormones. I mean, I still have like hirsutism, which is like coarse chin hair. And I've noticed I have a lot of awareness around like why it does it. But to answer your question about the vagus nerve, what happened in 2014 before I gained all the weight, when I lost that weight. And I was under 100 pounds. My mom was like, this is not like, something's wrong. Something's not right. Let's go to the doctor. So we go to the doctor, my like family care practitioner. She takes blood work. And I'm sitting there, I'm sitting on the edge of the little bed, and she starts taking the blood from me. And I was talking to my mom, and I was like, Mom, just keep talking to me because this is bothering me. And then and they had to take like 8 vials of blood, something like crazy. And anyways, and I was like, I'm really thirsty and can I have some water? And the woman was like, you can't because you'll throw up. She knew. And I was like, well, I'm thirsty. I know I'm nauseous feeling. That's why. But anyways, I don't even know what my mom was saying to me. She probably should have had me talking more to her versus me just listening. Anyways, at some point I was like, I need to like lay down. They were like, yeah, that's fine. Like lay down. That's the last thing I remember is me like kind of leaning backwards. And then I come like my eyes open and there's like 3 other nurses in the room. There was a nurse that was getting the blood. So the actual doctor was in the room. There's 3 other nurses in the room and they were like holding my arms. My mom is like at the foot of the bed, tears in her eyes, like hands over face or hands over mouth. And I was like, what's going on? And the doctor was like, and it smelled like ammonia. Ammonia. Yeah. It smelled like ammonia in the room. And I was like, what is that? And they were like, welcome back. And my mom goes, I swear to God, you just had a seizure and you have never had a seizure before. And I was like, huh? And they were like, if you didn't wake up in the next few seconds, like we were about to call an ambulance and get you to the hospital. Like you were out. Anyways, ever since that moment, I have had this vagus nerve issue. And I didn't obviously know that's what it was when it happened, but the body went into such a like the blood leaving my body, I don't know, something, the gut, all of it connected. It was just an immediate like trauma response. My body just freaked out. And now every time I go to get, and I go like, not, I don't get like donate blood, but for health reasons, I get blood draws. And I have to make sure that I am laying down, legs crossed, have my phone in my hand, watching something on social media, but also talking and listening to the nurse who's drawing the blood. Like I have to be fully stimulated in order for me not to pass out. And I think just through dialogue, talking to other people about my experience of what had happened, they were like, you're vagus, like you have vasovagal syncope. And I'm like, what? Like, obviously I'd never heard of that before. And granted, I think my only like techniques as far as like what I do to calm myself now when I feel myself getting a little flustered, I just start saying, Kelly, you're okay, you're safe, you're okay, you're safe, that kind of thing. And kind of like what you said, I probably just like kind of hold myself a little bit. Unbeknownst to me, that's what I was actually doing a technique in a sense, but just like calming myself down. But I mean, I've gotten a little bit better. I have been able to sit up and get some blood taken, here and there sometimes, but I specifically tell the nurse, I have this, like, you have to talk to me. And like, it's really interesting. And there are certain topics that kind of get me more fired up. So I will tell them, hey, talk to me about this topic. And so then my focus is like on that topic. And I'm like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, you're done? You've already taken the blood? Like, it's so crazy. So it's really interesting. But yeah, it's just been crazy. I know there have been times, not even like the blood draw situation, but there have been a couple of other times, like almost mimicking like hypoglycemia, that it happens too. Like all of a sudden, like, I mean, I may have eaten 3 hours prior to, but I don't know if it's because of like the Georgia heat or something, but all of a sudden, like my body from head to toe, completely drenched in sweat. I go like very lethargic to the point, like I have to get horizontal very quick. And like it happened to me a few years ago. Like I said, I had eaten breakfast and I went outside, or I ate lunch, went outside to like lay by the pool. It was probably like 85, 90 degrees outside and I'm fine. But I was like, okay, kind of hungry again. And I start to walk in and it's probably like a solid half a football field from like my condo pool to my home, and like partway there back to my door, I was like, oh no, it's happening.
Mm.
Oh gosh. And like my hand, like literally just, I was losing like voluntary control in my arms, and like they just started like falling down by my side. And I was trying to walk as fast as possible to get into my house. And I did. I made it in my house, but and I had, intuitively knew that I like needed to get some like sugar or something. So I used to like buy like I will always now have like juice or some type of like sweet beverage in my house. And I have it on like the low shelf in my refrigerator, because what I did that day, I like slid into my kitchen on the hardwood floors, on the floor, opened the refrigerator, grabbed the orange juice, and took sips of it. And I was like, almost, and it reminds me of like Julia Roberts in Still Magnolias when she's like having like a diabetic coma.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm like, what? I don't, and granted, I have been tested for diabetes, like pre-diabetes, and I actually am okay. So it's like, I don't know if it's just in those certain scenarios just trigger it,
Right.
or if these are preemptive signs to
Mm.
something, a worse condition happening. So
Yeah.
it's scary though. It's very scary because I'm like, I live by myself. Like it's really freaking scary. I'm like, I could be here for hours and be totally passed out.
You need like a life alert.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But
It's
no,
like,
that's terrifying, Kelly. And what honestly impresses me just hearing that story is how wise your nervous system was able to orient, and just you were able to find resources in situations like that where it's clearly a traumatic response. And so if you do need to get blood drawn, I think that's fantastic that you're like, please talk to me about this. This is exactly what I need. Looking at a phone, I did the same thing going into surgery. Surgery terrifies me. And just a couple of months ago, I was like, I am intentionally disassociating.
yeah,
Sometimes dissociation where it's just like we're checking out, we're not trying to be present in our body. It can be seen as a negative thing. It's something our body does when we're in trauma naturally. But I'm all for intentional dissociation for moments where it's like, this is outside of my nervous system's capacity to feel safe. So I'm going to, yeah, watch a show or zone out.
mhm.
And I think in situations like that, there's so many clients that are like, is this a physical thing, where I have a disorder, or is it trauma?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it could be one, it could be the other, it could be both, but I always tell my clients just follow the sacred breadcrumbs, which are just the little, what I call the hints and the nudges, and just keep following the path of what you are leaning into when it comes to exploring answers for that. And it sounds like you're doing that. You've
Yeah.
been tested, you're going to this doctor, you do somatic work yourself. And so the answers will come. Just keep following the little breadcrumbs
Yeah.
until you feel like, okay, now I understand and I have 2020 vision on what that was leading me to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because I listened to like a master class of this woman who I just, mutual friends, and she's a coach. But anyways, I've never taken one of her programs. She just had this master class one day, and it was obviously about like money mindset and things like that. But the start of her, she's obviously sharing her story in the first like day one. And she shares I about her underate, her disordered eating, how she underate and then got vasovagal. And I was like,
What are the odds?
and so I DM'd her and I was like, oh my God, can you tell me a little bit more of that? And she was like, yeah, like I essentially, I mean, I was eating, but I was pretty much starving myself, like I wasn't, and it like wrecked so much of my gut that, and that's it, that vagus nerve connects to your gut and it goes to your
Yeah,
brain. And she was like, it just was like, what the fuck are you doing to me?
yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
thing. I was like, that's so like I never understood why, but and maybe it could be coincidental, but I was like, that's when it started, was when I
yeah.
had lost all that weight because I was severely under eating. And I was
Mhm.
like, that has to be why that happened. It triggered the vagus nerve to just freak out. So yeah, it's been I know that I should probably be doing like what is it like the vagus nerve like toning, like vagal toning, I
Yeah.
guess, like on a probably everyday basis, and that would probably help. But I
You
don't.
can do that. Yeah. Also opportunity to, kind of rewrite the blueprint of that original traumatic incident with, what happened to you. And it is, like we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, you don't always have to go backwards and open up that can of worms in order to move
Right.
forward. But if it ever feels right for you, and if it does feel like I'm nudging to try to rewrite that, you can revisit that moment and basically complete the cycle of what your body was wanting to do. So for example, if in that moment you were powerless to run away or to stand up or to whatever it is, you can basically reenact that situation and do whatever it was that you weren't able to do in that moment. So if it
Mm,
was to all of a sudden stand up and have clarity or punch a nurse or like whatever the impulse was, actually acting that out in present moment, and that is a way to rewrite the subconscious connection as well.
mm, hmm.
I can guide you through it if you ever want. Just call me.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
You're
Yeah,
like,
because well, my brain's like, okay, well, what was it about that scenario about me, under eating and all of that? Like, obviously, that was related to a psychological thing of me being like, oh, well, maybe if I get like super trim, like he'll see me and want to be with me again or something like that, And it's like so silly how our minds work.
relatable. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it wasn't like a conscious thought, but it was there. I mean, that has to be the reason why I decided to do that. It's so wild. But anyways, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm excited I like that. I've seen that on your Instagram stories about the grounding technique, about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 of all the senses. I like
Yeah.
that a lot. Just
That's my
present
go-to.
things.
It's a lot of my clients' favorite, but it's not for everyone. So yeah, think of somatic work like shopping. Try on all of it, keep what fits, and release what doesn't fit for you. But
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is a superpower that we're all sitting on, just tapping on the wisdom of our own body, and we're just not really taught how to access that. And so when I stumbled upon it, it was like, why was this never taught to me, right? Like, why
yeah.
don't schools teach this? But it's okay. There's a lot of awareness growing around it now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting too, I think, as you said earlier, it's like it's so, reachable and so simple. Like some of these
Yeah.
things, like just doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like it's so it's not like some crazy technique or like you said, these like intense, like inner child, like workshops and things like that. But I think that's it sometimes. Like I recognize that I can be very impatient with my healing journey too. And I'm like, I love when I have like a fascinating breakthrough with someone. I'm like, whoa, like something just radically shifted inside of me. And I guess maybe sometimes with these techniques, because it is potentially a daily practice, it feels like it's not working, right?
Totally. Yes. 100%. Yeah, I was just talking with Carrie about this earlier. And there are those moments, right, of the big groundbreaking releases, especially with some of those things like Sacred Rage and releasing stuff like that. But yeah, so much of it is more subtle, it's more simple, it's more slow. It is not flashy and, crazy. And that's what we get high on, though, right? Just as
Right.
humans in this hustle culture, this fast paced world that we're all in, we get high on the highs. And so it can feel threatening to our nervous system, really threatening to slow down and just to be. And our nervous system doesn't give a shit about what's good for us, what's bad for us. It only knows what's familiar. And it's
Yeah.
going to crave familiarity any given day of the week, right? Over what's quote unquote good or healthy. So it's training and titrating, just giving ourselves little bite-sized tastes of let me just even do 1 minute of like just going slow, right? And not rushing to my next appointment. And okay,
Mm.
how did that feel? Okay, I didn't die. Maybe I can do 2 minutes next. But it's yeah, it can feel really hard to see and believe that it's working until it adds up and reaches this like cumulative tipping point, and you get to this place where you wondered so long, how will I ever get there? Whatever there is, your healing destination, your vision of, your healed relationship or business or whatever it is, you're going to wonder how to get there until you wonder, how did I get here? And it was
Right.
like little, seemingly insignificant moments along the way.
That's so true. That's so true. Okay, I have two questions. You brought up anxious and avoidant attachment style earlier. Um, First question, based on your experience of working with multiple couples, does it seem that a female is more the anxious and the male is more the avoidant in most cases versus the other way around? Like, can a guy, like, and granted, in my own personal experience, I feel like I have been more of the anxious. I've attracted more avoidant men. Is that like a standard? Or are there more women out there that are very avoidant and the men are more anxious?
Yeah, I've never been asked that question,
Yeah.
Kelly. That's an amazing question. Like,
I'm just
wow,
wondering.
how has that never come up? That's so good. Dominantly, what I've seen of all the women and the couples that I've spoken with over many years is it tends to be the woman that is typically the anxious, and
Yeah.
the male that is more avoidant, or the other one is disorganized, which is a combination of both anxious and avoidant, where it's like, I want love, but I'm terrified of love. I want
Yeah.
intimacy, but it freaks me out. So, but yeah, there definitely are women in my program. There's couples that I've met where it's completely reversed. And I notice there can be shame in that because typically, dominantly it seems like it is the woman. But I think a lot of that can even go back societally, right? Like we are in a society that women have been historically for generations dependent on men. And if they are not there, right? And if we are abandoned, then we literally could die. Like women didn't make money for years. It's not the world that we live in now where we can be the breadwinners and provide for ourselves. So I think a lot of that
Hmm.
can be traced back
Makes
ancestrally.
sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I've gone through a couple of times just like various attachment style programs myself to heal and become more secure because like I said, I feel mine has been more anxious, not super like I'm probably the disorganized, like I'm the anxious avoidant. And I've
Mhm.
been, but worse at one point, gotten better, got closer to being more secure and that kind of thing. Um, but all of that's talk, as you were saying up here, the 20%, right? It's not necessarily these techniques. So I guess it's using these types of somatic tools to really, I guess, be the catalyst to kind of like kick that to help you heal that anxious and or avoidant attachment style because I feel like the workshops that I've done, yes, I have awareness. So if something comes up, I'm like, oh, if I'm pushing it away, I'm like, Kelly, okay, that's an old story. Or why, what are you actually really afraid of? Like I have this inner dialogue with myself. So I'm able to have the self-awareness, or I have the self-awareness to be able to kind of bring myself back to the present moment. But it's more like I'm giving myself talk therapy versus like sinking into my body and being like, where is this story really at? So that we can like really become secure and
Yep.
stop this anxious avoidant. Because even although I've been, working with various coaches on different things for 4 5 years now, it's like I still have anxious avoidant attachment style.
Uh-huh.
And maybe I always will to some degree, but I mean, granted, I'm super glad that I've never been like the super like possessive jealous type. Like super anxious. Like I've never been that way. Mine's just like, you like text a guy and like he doesn't write you back right away. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
or it's like he texts you like on a Friday morning, like, hey, good morning. And then you don't hear from him until Tuesday the next week. And you're like, what'd you do all weekend? Like, why didn't you ask me to hang out? Like, where are you? It's that level of anxiousness that I have.
Yes.
Maybe that's the abandonment feeling or something,
Maybe.
but I don't know. It's just so interesting.
You like are perfectly primed for breakthrough in this area just because of how much work you've done. Like I can tell
Yeah.
you've done the workshops, you've got so much head knowledge, and you also do know some somatic stuff. And I know you're like diving in deeper, but it's bringing those tools into those moments when you are triggered, right? When he doesn't text you back, or that was a
Mm,
big one for me because with my history of betrayal, if his phone vibrated, I'd be like immediately triggered. Who's he talking
Right.
to? Who is that
Right.
really? And it was in those moments that at first it would take such a long time to get myself back to a state of being grounded from that sympathetic survival response to that parasympathetic, like I'm safe, I'm okay, I can breathe. And I would just be upstairs, right? Like by myself doing these grounding techniques. Sometimes it would take up to an hour. Pulling on these until I felt like I was finally grounded again and able to communicate, hey, Sebastian, I noticed when your phone vibrated, like this is how I responded in my body. This is the thoughts that went through my head. This is how I felt. What I'm needing right now is this. And normally, like old dance with you, I would have asked you to meet that need and fix that for me. But instead, this is what I did for the past hour. Like I just went upstairs
Yeah.
and soothed my nervous system. If you want to support me in this, this is how you can support me. So that's just kind of like a script that I teach my clients too of when you're triggered, a way you can pull on those in the moment. But then if it feels like the right time to communicate what happened to your partner and let them know, hey, this is how you can support me and heal, it tends to be a much better tactic than what I tried for years, which is like, you triggered me, and who are you talking to? And
Right. Yeah. Okay, so you obviously, I mean, granted, obviously, yes, you went through all these programs, but how did Sebastian, obviously your husband, did he also go through somatic? Did he do any of this?
Not at first. He was very
Okay.
not on board at first. And a lot of women ask, is it possible to heal my marriage without my husband being on board? And I'm like, 100% yes.
Mm.
Sebastian had seen me trying a lot of things over the years. I did a lot of different programs. I always had this like great new idea. And so when I stumbled upon the somatic program, and this one was the priciest investment I had ever made, it's like a $5,700 course, my first high ticket
Mhm.
investment. And he was like, you spent how much? I hope that was out of your own money. Like, don't dip into art, like that was his attitude. And he's basically like, good luck. I hope that works, very
Right.
skeptical. And so this was the shift, though, that if you ask him now, when did things actually turn around for you and Becky? He would say that my energy just shifted. It wasn't new words I was saying or something I had convinced him of or anything
Mm.
different other than how he felt around me. He got this different sense of like, whoa, she's really got herself. Like she doesn't need me to act a certain way or respond a certain way for her to be okay. I've never seen her this grounded. And it's what allowed him to start feeling safe enough to move towards me again. And we started having our first ever real, honest, authentic conversations in our marriage. And
Hmm.
so it wasn't until this year that he invested in his first coach. This was, years later, but he had healed enough before making his first investment for me to feel really safe with him. And he picked up a lot from
Hmm.
just me, being how I was being and not trying to force him to do anything. And now he's like so interested and constantly asking questions like, what's that containment hold? And, remind me what that chakra is associated with. I'm like, who are you? This is nuts. What's happening?
So cool. I love that though. Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know if you're familiar with Melanie Lair. She's been on the podcast before, but just very she's one of my like favorite coaches that I've literally like never worked one-on-one with her ever, but my first one-on-one coach, she did work with this woman and went through one of her programs. And anyways, I did listen to a masterclass of hers one time, and what you just said reminded me a lot of that. Like she was like, when it comes to like, your partnership, your relationship, it's like you have to build this like super sturdy foundation of yourself. And it's like your partner is just the decoration around your like Colosseum column, basically, right? And she's like, they're just that decoration to adorn you and whatever. But if that Colosseum column is not sturdy enough and it's crumbling, those decorations are also going to fall. And
Mhm.
she was like, there's like you have two choices. You can be very empowering or you can be very critical. And many of us take on the approach of being more in that critical role of like mothering our partner. And it was just something that was like so, impactful for me to hear because I feel like that's a lot of what I've heard, whether growing up or just around other people, other friends, families, parents, that kind of thing. And being now in just being in different relationships, seeing other relationships, witnessing, and I can see that with even, some friends of mine and like how their relationship dynamic is with their partner. And it's just interesting to me. Like, so I have that awareness and not that I've been in a relationship really lately, but I feel like I'm like excited to like practice that non-mothering, just focus on myself and be more in that encouraging space than criticizing space.
Yeah.
Um, but what you said about the energy, basically, like he felt your energy and that's it. It's like your energy is going to attract. And going back to like the attachment styles, what I've learned too, it's like that anxious attachment style, like that needy, graspy, snorkeling for air, that just makes a guy be like, that is not what I want. Like, get away from me. You are stage 5 clinger, go away, And it's like, oh my gosh. But then, you have to think about the first time that they saw you, the first time that they met you. You had this confidence, you had this air about you, you had like this energy about you, this vibration. And that's what immediately attracted them to you. But then, yeah, they all say the honeymoon phase, it like goes away and your real colors are starting to show. And the guys too, I mean, I've met a number of guys that are like, oh yeah, I definitely like put on the impression, bug the first few months of us dating. And then it was exhausting to keep that up. And so it's like they're not being themselves either, kind of thing. So it's just like exhausting. And I feel like that's like the honeymoon phase ending is because the guys can't keep up this like constant trying to impress the person because it's not really truly who they are deep down. It's not their love languages or whatever the case may be. And then the girl is like, then the guy's not showing up really anymore as they have been from what they knew from the very beginning of this like impressing guy. And then the girl starts getting all like, well, what's going on? You must be cheating on me. Like this must be happening. And then that anxiousness just and that needy and that grassy. And then they're like, well, screw it. Now I really am going to go cheat on you because you're, you're not who I thought you were, and it's just like, it's so crazy. But I wish that they taught these things like earlier. As you were talking, I'm like, can I just like go through one of your programs? Like, I know I'm not like in a marriage, but like to like prepare myself for the relationship that's to come
Yeah. People
versus,
do that. Yeah.
yeah, like that's so
I think
neat.
that
Like,
I
I
wish
don't,
I'd known earlier. Totally. Yeah, you described that so well, Kelly. It's so across the board everywhere. What you just described, the progression where there is that stage and it's natural. Like we wouldn't connect without that kind of presenting and putting our, best foot forward. And there's always like a grief and oftentimes an anger of like, you lied to me, you led me on. And it's not always intentional. It's not like I was trying to deceive this person. It's just that's part of the connection, kind of mating, natural progression of things. There's that first honeymoon phase, and then really we start to see each other and often don't like what we see. And it triggers our own childhood wounds in that stage. And
yeah,
then there's that, I love how you described it, the Colosseum rebuilding of where at least one person decides like this isn't working for me anymore. I need to figure out how to step back into power and just build up me, whether this relationship works out or not. I am tired of, abandoning myself and I don't want to do that anymore.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to abandon myself anymore. It's not a good place.
No.
Obviously, you wrote a whole post on about it after our conversation. I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, I was so impacted by that because I asked you, I was like, of everything you've been through, what was the most traumatic? And I expected you to be like, yeah, the, plot line and my story getting twisted or just my trauma being broadcasted on national television. And it wasn't that. You said it was me abandoning myself. And I was like, oof. I was like silent for a moment because that really is the deepest wound of all of the women that I've worked with as well. They might come in being like, hey, cheated on me, or I'm in an abusive relationship. There's a lot of external things that happen to them. They have every right to call themselves a victim because
Mm,
technically they are a victim to, unfair things that have happened outside of their control. But to
right.
see those women really deep down suffer the most with, but how did I let it get to that point? Or how did I allow myself to be treated that way? Or how did I not, speak my truth or see this sooner? that seems to be the deepest wound that I see women carrying.
Yeah, I can see that too. Yeah. There's a lot of like just guilt and shame
Yeah,
in that.
so much.
Oh, well, of course we can talk forever and ever. But this has been great. Thank you so much for being here. I want you tell everyone where they can find you and all of that, all the
Yeah,
things.
Instagram, Becky underscore Aste. And then I have a free training called Three Secrets to Thriving Intimacy. So that's a great thing to watch even before marriage.
Yeah,
All the stuff I wish I had known 10 years before shit hit the fan. I'll give that to you for free for your listeners.
that's awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah. And if there's any, I'm gonna start asking my guests this, like, there's anything you want to like do or like call in for this year, like, how are you going to chase life with Kelly this year?
I love that. This is my year of health, actually. I feel like everything was burning in a dumpster fire my whole life, every area. And the first fire I got under control was the relationship, and it bled into healing money wounds and healing spiritual wounds and, parenting. And I feel like now is my time to really focus on my health. And so I am going to chase life with Kelly by becoming the best version of my healthiest self.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Thank you. Yay. I hope that for you too. I know that you will.
Thank you.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. And I'm sending you all kinds of love. I know that you're going through a little tough time right now too. So,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. And you're going to come on my podcast soon too. So we'll continue the conversation and I can't
absolutely.
wait.
Me too. Me too. Well, thanks, girl.